Hey everyone, welcome to Group Thinkers. I'm your host Justin McCord. With me now, as always, is Ronnie Richard. Ronnie, who's made a permanent space in our little apartment complex here, and today, on today's episode, we're transitioning. This is a little bit of a transitional conversation for us, and so we have spent all of our sixth season talking about Gen X and used RKD Group's Gen X research as the foundation for some really interesting conversations around Gen X, and so it's clear based off of those conversations that one, everyone's trying to find younger donors, and that no one's quite figured it out, right? Ronnie, anything else that stood out to you just before we make this wonderful transition?
Yeah. I mean, well, first, I appreciate being a part of this last season. It's been a lot of fun meeting a lot of, different guests that we've had, and they've offered so many different perspectives, I think, and a couple of things that kind of stood out to me, in talking about Gen X so much and younger donors was that, like you said, everyone's trying to reach them, and we kind of uncovered that younger donors, or the younger Gen X and millennials, they're interested seemingly in a lot of like social movements and influence and then those sort of things, and more so than maybe like financial donations. And so it's like, how do we, I don't know, maybe we've kind of uncovered something a little bit of how do you tap into that and how do you connect with younger donors, and younger, I mean, like 45 and under.
Right. No, I think it's an important, relevant conversation. Equally as relevant as we transition now into our seventh season of Group Thinkers is thinking about something that's incredibly topical. It can be heavy at times, and so that is the supply chain and the global supply chain, but also the supply chain's impact on nonprofits. So throughout this seventh season, you're going to hear from folks in the nonprofit space, from the leadership side, from the production side, from the economics side. So trying to think through the entirety of the supply chain and how the current state is impacting nonprofits. And so we wanted to launch off with a conversation with the K in RKD, our very own Tim Kersten, CEO of RKD Group. Tim, how are you this morning?
Well, I'm feeling included, and it's really nice because all this talk about Gen Xers, and it's like I'm a baby boomer, and don't forget the baby boomers. And you haven't. You've invited me on our podcast, and I appreciate the measure of respect that I'm accorded for that, given the big emphasis on Gen Xers, who I love. So anyway, in all seriousness, it's going to be.
You're definitely included. You're definitely included, and it's a great topic for you to be a part of the conversation on, because you have spent a lot of time thinking about it and diving into it to understand it and just keep an eye on how it impacts the nonprofit space. In fact, for everyone listening or watching, if you open up a browser and go to rkdgroup.com and check out our blog resources, you'll see a blog recently published from Tim about the supply chain. So just kind of framing the conversation, I think about the first time where I started to really process the supply chain's impact on my own life was in the toilet paper and disinfectant wipe crisis of March and April 2020. But since then, there have been a couple of other interesting supply chain notes, even over the summer, as my family and I were driving from Texas to the Gulf part of Florida and stopping at restaurants where they did not have any chicken dishes available because there was a chicken shortage at the time reaching some of the southern parts of the United States. And so these are kind of like odd inconveniences, but there's a real impact of the supply chain, and there's a real impact of how it ultimately affects nonprofits. Tim, share with us a little bit of the insights that you captured in your blog.
Well, I'd like to say something that I've told our team is that we are all in the same storm. We're all in different boats. So if you're a restaurateur, or if you're a big bank, Bank of America or Citi, whatever, mailing millions of credit card applications through the mail, you're in the same storm. It's just different boat, impacting you differently. So the nonprofit community is in its own boat, and companies like ours is in the same boat and experiencing it differently. And so what we're seeing is delays in some, not all, mailings. And we're seeing a struggle with our vendors. The biggest adhesive and label manufacturer in the world is our partner, and they're struggling because of I didn't know that adhesive material is derived from petrochemical products, which were in the petrochemical plants in southern Texas were frozen out last winter. And so there are numerous shortages, and then the raw paper and the pulp factories, paper mills have shut down or have decided just like magically that this would be a great time to rehabilitate their plants and re-engineer them, or do scheduled maintenance and things like that. And so it really is a perfect storm of a whole bunch of things happening. And of course, COVID is the umbrella over all of it, where you have COVID has produced problems in shipping and transportation, truck transportation, staffing, all sorts of facilities, from the actual paper manufacturers to print shops to mail shops and so forth. So it's everybody is feeling it in different ways, and our clients are definitely seeing it. It is not the sky is not falling, but for some the sky is a bit cloudier than we would prefer. And it just depends on where you're sitting, how big your organization is, what's the nature of your communication plan, and so forth. So there's a lot of variability within that, but clearly anybody who watches and stays in touch with the news knows that there is a global supply chain challenge. If you're wanting to buy a used car, new car, or something with microchips, it's going to affect you. So here we are. From a direct mail standpoint, of course, RKD has a large digital practice, and we can get to that in a minute, but direct mail still is the backbone of individual fundraising for nonprofit organizations nationally. And so it's having an impact, and we do have some thoughts on how nonprofits should respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not one point in the supply chain.
Right.
Like there are blemishes in each point, right? So whether or not that's from the raw materials to getting the raw materials to a place to manufacture something, whether or not that's adhesives or just paper, and then getting that to the production facilities to turn it into our envelopes or into our labels or into our letters, and then you go from there into the United States Postal Service slowing down delivery times,
Right.
which the postage went up at the end of August, and the announcement or the rollout of intentional slow deliveries and starting at the beginning of October. Just another layer of complications, and this is all just to get something into the hands of donors. So yeah, I mean that adds up to just getting into hands. Then you got to think, okay, well, mailing something back, is that
Right.
that has potential delays, and so the impact on caging facilities, and then getting into nonprofits into their bank streams from a cash flow standpoint. There is significant kinks in each part of this chain.
No question about it, Justin. And I think the thing you didn't mention, I don't think you did, is inflationary pressure. Where paper prices have gone up 6 times in 2021. Even if your mail program isn't disrupted because a lack of paper adhesives or whatever, you're still going to be paying more for your paper, and you're going to be paying more for postage, and it's going to go slower. So that's the sort of fits the category of paying more for less, and that is, in fact, we're actually seeing it in some consumer packaged goods where the package size is the same, but the actual amount of content, but I digress. I shouldn't be talking about my Chips Ahoy package. So anyway, so yeah, it's very concerning. There's simply no doubt about it. I mean, our KD Group, we focus on providing maximum net revenue for our clients over a long period, long-term net revenue. We're all about delivering value for our donors, and so because we know that's what funds programs, and that's what keeps the lights on. And so this is really serious for nonprofits to make sure they have the operating income they need to keep going. And so that's our passion, that's our commitment. And so we're partnering with our clients to help them navigate this challenging time. And one of our first points of recommendation for our clients is not to pull out of the market. And I'm going to go back to my baby boomer credentials, if you'll forgive me. But when you've been walking around on this planet for as many years as I have, you get sort of this long view of history, and you've been through stuff before, and you've seen ebbs and flows, and you've seen peaks and troughs, and you come through them. And just over the course of my career, every time that there has been some sort of shock to the system in the United States, where nonprofit mailers go, oh my gosh, we got to stop mailing, or we got to cut back. The same answer. I remember 9/11, 20 years ago this fall, and I was in my prior life consulting and so forth, and a lot of nonprofits were saying, oh my gosh, we should get out of the market, and some did, and I said, no, stay in the market. Stay in the market, stay in the market. And they did. And we saw that in 2008. We saw it a few years ago. And the nonprofits that have stayed in the market and innovated and found new channels, new avenues, new ways of talking to their donors and reaching their donors have succeeded. And that's the most important thing. Even if a mailing is going to be late, and we know that nonprofits are experiencing some delays, and I talk to other folks in the business outside of our company, outside of our client base, and it's better to have something in your donor's mailbox from a direct mail standpoint than nothing. It's better to be a few days late than not at all. And so that's our first piece of advice, is to stay in the market.
Tim, it actually all seems a little scary, but it also is, you referenced earlier, you used the analogy of a storm. And so I think that it's probably important for people to also understand that, when you're in a storm, for some people it's just a sprinkle, and for others it's a deluge. And so no matter where you find yourself on that spectrum, right, and the coverage, that paying attention to it and not overreacting, as you're saying, are really keys to maintaining strong relationships with your donors, which has got to be the number one focus.
Well, not only strong relationships with your donors, but don't stop acquiring new donors. And we have seen this, sadly, is that in the, it gets scary, and then we've seen nonprofits, and we've seen this pre-COVID, okay? We have seen some major nonprofits that for one reason or another thought that strategically it made sense to stop acquiring new donors and channel the money into other channels and so forth, and it didn't turn out well. And so our counsel also is to keep mailing your acquisition packages. You have strong control packages, and we have seen incredibly strong acquisition results throughout COVID, last year, this year. And so if the paper supply challenges might cause a mailing to go out a bit late, I know there are blocked times with list rentals you may have to negotiate or whatever, but stay in the market, stay in the mails, keep acquiring donors, because well, we've all seen the charts. If you look at a 3-year trend line in a nonprofit, or 5-year, and you see some dip in donor income and quantity, well, you're going to trace it back to when you stopped your acquisition program. You have to stay in the market both with your donors and with acquisition.
So cutting acquisition, bad. and it's amazing we have to keep saying that, but we do. We need to keep saying that, because it's something that, especially I think a lot of nonprofit leaders get, they get pressure at the board level,
Right.
around that topic. And
Yep.
so you're constantly looking for lessons and ways to remind that. So then cutting is bad. So then what should nonprofits do?
Well, one, and I'm not sure this is quite the answer you wanted, because this is more a strategic issue. I think one of the greatest problems with nonprofit organizations that have substantial, or let's say successful, effective direct mail program, is the board. Very often very bright, successful people, wonderful folks, but they don't understand the mathematics of direct mail fundraising, acquisition, and cultivation. And so if you only focus on the expense of it and not on the revenue side of the ledger, then you're going to be making bad decisions. So the time to educate your board is now on the importance of this sustaining this lifeline of cash donations from individual donors through thick and thin, up and down. You just have to stay in the game, and so you've got to bring your board into the conversation before there's a crisis, but during a crisis as well. And you know, the old adage of the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best is right now. So plant trees and plant more trees with your board. So in terms of what should nonprofits be doing, they should be communicating authentically the truth to their donors. And there are a couple dimensions to this beyond just pure sort of direct mail strategy of how do you navigate the paper shortage. We've been challenging our nonprofit clients to think about, well, how is the supply chain crisis impacting the service delivery for their organization? If their costs are going up, well, that's actually a message that can and should be conveyed in all channels of communication: social media, email, direct mail, everything. What's the story of the nonprofit organization? How are they being affected in real time right now? And what might be impeding their ability to deliver on their mission? Well, if costs are going up and they have to buy more things because they're not being donated, all those kinds of things, you should talk to your donors about that and put it in front of them, and it's remarkable how they will respond. The other thing is to be flexible in terms of if there are delays, changing mailing dates. Think about different packaging if you can do that. At the last, if you have been planning on using mailing labels, well, if you have a successful package that works pretty well without mailing labels, then just don't do the mailing labels and do the package and revise the copy accordingly, because something is way, way, way better than nothing. So you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good enough in an environment like this. And sometimes a nonprofit might actually want to invest more in direct mail at this time. It seems counterintuitive, but we know that some people have pulled back. Some nonprofits have pulled back. And again, staying in front of donors and prospective donors is a very wise thing to do. So depending on your circumstance, budget constraints, those kinds of things, it might actually help to ramp up some efforts. And adjusting the channel mix is the most obvious thing, but it's actually a little more difficult to do than we think, because especially as we're now in the fourth quarter and this is prime time for fundraising and so forth, and reallocating some budget dollars from direct mail to digital or DRTV, that looks good on paper. It's hard to move those needles in those processes at warp speed in an environment like this, or in any environment for that matter. But there are things that can be done. But I will say, going back to the analogy of when's the best time to plant a tree, we'll just apply it to when's the best time to optimize your digital program. Well, it's like yesterday. We actually saw this with a big hurricane that hit Texas and Houston area in the Gulf Coast several years ago. One of our clients there had done great work partnering with us on optimizing their website, their digital presence, and they were able to harvest amazing a number of gifts. And then it happened again with COVID, just an outpouring of support to that nonprofit because they were ready to receive. And if your web presence, if your digital presence is not strong, if it's under optimized, if it's clunky, the user experience is bad, then you're going to be hurting yourself. So you got to get that up to speed, because we live in an omnichannel world, and people are going to go where they have the best experience, where they're comfortable. And so it's not all about direct mail, though that is still the workhorse. It's about every other channel, and shifting your channel mix if you can in a time like this.
I mean, in summary, it kind of sounds like a lot of the same advice that we were given to nonprofits during the start of the pandemic. Be sure to communicate, over communicate, be flexible, adjust where you have to, but don't pull out of the market. And we saw a lot of nonprofits have success with that.
Yeah, I feel a little bit like a broken record. In this particular context, there are wrinkles to it that make it difficult. We know there's an envelope shortage out there. Okay, well, what do you do with that? One thing that we're seeing clearly is that the timelines for planning campaigns and ordering materials. I mean, we have ordered materials many months in advance, for the fall season, and there are still some challenges. And we're buying further in advance and reserving time on presses and reserving paper and so forth for well into the spring, because the experts say that this is going to persist into 2022, well into 2022. So, but it can be mitigated and managed by just advanced planning, strong relationships with partners, vendors, suppliers, and so forth, which is one, we're grateful in our company. We're a major mailer in the U.S. and so having those kinds of relationships, we're very well positioned, and we've got a great team. So
yeah, the communication factor, you just can't ignore how many ills that doesn't solve for, but it can at least provide some salve on top of whatever that ill might be. And so Tim, I appreciate you chatting with us. I appreciate your leadership in staying on top of this and helping us as a company navigate through this, but also just the challenge to other nonprofit leaders to be aware and to be proactive, whether or not that's being proactive with their teams, with their partners, with their board. That proactivity and staying in front of it is probably going to help us weather whatever the storm looks like as it comes.
Yeah, and every storm eventually passes and the sun breaks through, and that's going back to sort of this long view of history. And you go, okay, well, we made it through that, and yeah, it's a little bumpy right now, and but we'll emerge on the other side of this, because there's a lot of it's interesting. This actually, the question is always out there. Well, isn't direct mail dead? Well, if direct mail was dead, then people would be a lot less concerned about the supply chain crisis and the impact on paper and the postal service, right? Now, this is really important. Direct mail is really important. It is not dead. It's not going away anytime soon. Yeah, we have to weather this storm, but there's a lot of alignment across the supply chain, from paper suppliers to printers and so forth. Everybody wants to do the right thing and do well and help one another. There's a an amazing amount of cooperation and collaboration now going on in supply chain issues in our world, printers and mailers and so forth, because everybody has an interest in the continued success of not only the commercial side, but the nonprofit organizations. So a lot of really smart people, really focused in and managing through this, and we will get through it, and we'll look back on it someday and we'll go, that actually made us better. In fact, we have learned internally through some of our process evaluation in light of this. We've had some, we're a breakthrough company. That's what we stand for, is achieving breakthroughs never thought possible. And every crisis is an opportunity to learn and grow. And we have done that, our clients have done that. And so the sky's not falling. It's a little cloudy here and there, but the breezes are freshening, and they will. It'll be sunshiny again soon.
Tim, love your optimism, and so thanks for chatting with us. Thanks for sharing your perspective, helping us frame up the conversations that we're going to have over the next few weeks and months as we keep an eye on and really kind of dig into and uncover this important topic from multiple different angles. And so this episode of Group Thinkers is obviously going to be available in all podcast formats, but then as we go, the entire series, the entire 7th season, it's going to be available on RKD Group's website, rkdgroup.com. You can go there, find not only episodes of the podcast, but other resources. And I think that's it. I think that's it for today. Tim, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks to you and to Ronnie. Good being with you.
All right, we'll see y'all. See y'all down the road.